How are you doing, you wonderful nerds? Scott here, and we are back doing some more comment responses from you guys. It's been a while since we've done an episode of this. I didn't mean to take this long, but we have 3 videos that we have to get some comments from. The first one, I believe, is our Inhumans trying to replace the X-Men. The second video talks about The Flash and how his early stories had a lot of Cold War themes in them. And the third video was my very first Scooby-Doo video that I've ever done on this channel. Finally, I know it's been years since I've been teasing that I was going to do one of those, and we finally did it. We got comments from all of these videos, so let's go ahead and get right into it. All of these videos, by the way, will be linked in the description down below if you want to catch up. So let's go ahead and jump right into the very first video about the Inhumans replacing the X-Men. King of Mad Cows says, so Marvel is trying to replace mutants with Inhumans as allegories for oppressed minorities by massacring the mutants and making them more oppressed. Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point. That I probably should have brought that up in the video. Didn't even think about that. Extreme Toast says, honestly, as an Inhumans fan, the books, not the series, of course, I find it to be bloody insulting the way Marvel are just trying to make them replace the X-Men. No one's ever going to welcome a classic hero's replacement. Hell, look at the backlash with Riri Williams and Sam Wilson as Cap. It just doesn't work. The mainstream could have potentially enjoyed the Inhumans for what they are, glorified space Game of Thrones. But rather, they've been given the stereotype of being X-Men's forced replacements. Thanks to arguably the film industry, the Inhumans will now always be compared to and come second to the X-Men. So there's a lot of interesting points in here that I want to get to. Firstly, I just want to say that I don't think a blanket statement as, you know, no one's ever going to accept a replacement hero of a classic hero. I don't think that's just overly true for everyone. There are very specific examples where replacements of classic heroes definitely didn't work, but I think there are certainly examples where they did. There are certain comic book fans who grew up with Wally West as the Flash instead of Barry Allen, right? Green Lantern, another one. There's tons of examples, so I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that it would never work, because it has, and it does. Sometimes, not all the time, but it does. But to your larger point, I gotta say, I feel for you, dude. As someone who was a fan, or is a fan, I suppose you still are, of the Inhumans in comic book form, I can only imagine what this must feel like, because to a lot of people, this will be the first time they're exposed to the Inhumans. Even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did a similar thing if they watched that show. They're kind of in this space right now where people see them as X-Men, but not X-Men. When really, they should just be their own thing. The Inhumans. So Raymo leaves a comment about how I said the X-Men were stand-ins for oppressed minority groups, even though they were largely just mostly white dudes. Just a fun little observation, but they went on to write a very long comment, which you can see on the screen, about how the X-Men being mostly white dudes was kind of a tool to teach other white male readers about injustice and tolerance and all that stuff. And that's a fun way to kind of be apologetic towards it. A big part of my brain says that's probably not what they were thinking. They were probably just writing male white characters because in their minds that's what the default character was, which is problematic in its own right, but whatever. You could still absolutely spin it around in today and look at it as that way, as a tool to teach that group of people about what a bunch of other groups of people are experiencing. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts about that. So, this was just a joke that I made. You guys know this. I love Moon Knight. I did a Moon Knight video way back in the day as one of our very first videos on this channel. And, fun story, that video is titled, Is Moon Knight Marvel's Batman? So clearly something I haven't evolved from. And to address the question of have I ever read Moon Knight, the answer is yes. I love Moon Knight. He's one of my favorite heroes of all time. I'm just saying you can't ignore the similarities of a rich guy using thematic vehicles and weapons to go out and fight crime. It's just, I don't know, maybe that's vague enough that in my mind they're similar, but it fits. It works. I don't know if this proves anything, but this has been on my set for months now, and it's one of my favorite comic books that I own. So yes, I read Moon Knight. Come at me. Danny McMillan says, here's the difference between Inhumans and mutants. Mutants are minorities and Inhumans are nobility. Mutants want to be part of humanity. Their powers make a divide that's hard to get over. Inhumans couldn't care less about humanity and would rather chill on the moon. That's why the Inhumans are so cool. You are ascending to a brand new society with crazy powers and a royal family. Marvel wants to take that away from them and overall drive people to hate them. I fear for what they'll do to Atlantis if they want to use Namor. Oh god, Namor in the MCU. Yes. Played by Jason Momoa. That's his, I'm typecasting now. But yes, I'll agree that these distinctions that you wrote out here are exactly what the Inhumans were at the start, but Marvel is trying to transition them, especially with the idea of the new humans, as, you know, they are just regular people who want to fit in with society, but can't. Their powers create a divide, and it's basically explaining the exact same thing that the X-Men are. And then, like I said in the video, at this point, they may as well be mutants. Now let's move on to the video we did about how the early Flash comic books expressed a lot of Cold War American propaganda. You guys had a ton to say about this. Let's get right to it. 23 Lim says, I've calculated that there are an average of 5.9 puns per episode of NerdSync. I would genuinely love if this was an accurate calculation. I would love to see the chart and just like the Excel spreadsheet of all the puns. That'd be wonderful. Fun fact, there was actually an intro to this Flash video that I cut because I thought it was too punny. Like I said, stuff like the Flash TV show quickly became a runaway success. I'm upset with myself right now just thinking about it. Koi Ryder says, I feel Superman is a better interpretation of freedom, while characters like Flash and Green Lantern are more so interpretations of American progress, as they came from the space age, which was all about breaking limits. Absolutely. This is something that I maybe briefly touched on, but maybe didn't talk too much about. But like, yeah, Flash is always running forward. He's always moving quickly, progressing through life. I mean, one of his villains was called the Reverse Flash, right? Someone who rivaled that. It's so on the nose. And then, of course, as I talked about in the video, there's Captain Cold, someone who's trying to use a radioactive weapon to slow or stop completely Flash's forward progress. And in, like, the first Flash comic books, maybe even his very first appearance, he was constantly, you know, breaking the sound barrier, breaking the time barrier, breaking just the speed limit in general, you know? Nothing could contain the Flash. He scorned obstacles in his way, I think was the line. I think this is overthinking the Flash concept. Hi. Welcome to NerdSync. Indirectly containing the enemies in Showcase number 4 is a good way of getting around the CCA. He didn't solve problems with violence, and the crooks see justice. Robbers are the most obvious bad guy that you can make short of murderers, and the CCA wouldn't like murderers. The Flash name was already around, and they were just rebooting it. And the freedom from bounds is a good way to show that much speed. Comics were used for Cold War propaganda, and you can probably find Flash comics that were, but the Flash comics as a whole were an escape from Cold War anxieties. All right, so cool. I kind of want to break this down and kind of give my thoughts on each of these points. So talking about how containing the enemies instead of fighting them was a way to get around the CCA. CCA had no problem with just punching and stuff like that, so not really necessary. In fact, Flash would occasionally punch his enemies, but his go-to move was, you know, running around. So the idea that robbers are the most obvious bad guys, I might agree with you there. I would say they're probably the most obvious, but I think when you're in a medium that thrives on creativity, you'd probably want to go with something that's a little less obvious. And the fact that they continued to go with robbers is, I don't know, I think that's at least worth observing. I mean, one of these early Flash comics, he went to outer space to contain, like, a universe, to run around like a hole in the universe. That wasn't even a villain. That was just a Flash story. And it was very creative. And then when he got back to Earth, just more robbers. Then he talks about how comics were used for Cold War propaganda, and you can probably find some Flash comic books that were. There actually was an early Flash comic book where I think he was stopping a Cold War spy, so yes, sometimes they were very blatantly obvious about that. But the Flash comics as a whole were an escape from Cold War anxieties. I sort of kind of agree, but I would say you can be an escape and a remedy at the same time. There were tons of Cold War anxieties, and the point I was trying to talk about is how the Flash was used to alleviate a lot of those. And yes, maybe through escapism, but also maybe just by showing that there's nothing to fear. Science always works out for America. America's great. Again, comics talking, not me. So we have a thread here started by Joseph Wolfson, who says, that's funny because the Flash wears the colors of the USSR. And then there's a couple other replies about, the colors of the Kingdom of Spain or ketchup and mustard. So again, we're getting into this idea of just maybe overthinking things slightly. But hey, that's the point, guys. We're reading between the panels. And if you want to think, if you can make a whole essay about how Flash's colors were based on ketchup and mustard, you go for it. You live your best life. Elizabeth Diamond discovered my secret plan, so we'll just go ahead and skip right over that one and go to Star City Mayor, who says, Flash and Reverse Flash in a lot of ways represent the relationship between America and Russia during the Cold War. While they are opposites in philosophies, they both have the same power set. On top of that, neither of them can destroy the other without themselves ceasing to exist, which is the same as with Russia and America during the Cold War. And yeah, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, the whole idea of Reverse Flash was just super on the nose. Great observations, great comments, I love it. Jay the Narrator says, So would someone like Weather Wizard be a personification of the adverse effects that nuclear weapons could have on the environment, i.e. nuclear winter? So that is a really, really interesting comment, so much so that I'm going to go ahead and give you the NerdSync No prize this week. Yeah, I totally didn't think about that, but that's awesome. I mean, I feel like a lot of his villains could very easily just relate back to the Cold War quite nicely. And this one was just so good. So yes, last week we did a video all about some Shaggy Scooby-Doo lore that maybe you guys didn't know about, and it was about how Shaggy has sometimes been a vegetarian and sometimes not, depending on who was playing him. I know, super interesting stuff, but you guys had a ton of comments. Sci-Fi Pie says, so Scott, as an active comic book and Scooby-Doo fan, any thoughts on the 2 Batman-Scooby crossover episodes? Are you referring at all to this? I saw Batman Scooby-Doo crossover when I was a kid, and it was very confusing to me. That was my first initial reaction. But hey, it allows me to justify talking about Scooby-Doo on a channel that mostly talks about superheroes, because there was a crossover once. Hand Toon says, yes, absolutely, make more Scooby content, like Zoinks. It was a terrible Shaggy. But yeah, totally. In fact, this Shaggy video was kind of just on the back burner. I really want to do a philosophy of Mystery Incorporated. And I also learned just a ton of interesting history behind the show as I was researching this, like the whole line about how Velma, she can't see anything without her glasses. That whole classic bit was due to, I believe, the actress who played her initially. And that was just something that happened naturally at one of the table reads, is that she was like, I can't see without my glasses. And they were just like, hey, that's great, we should use that. Fact check me on that one, because I have it, I'm just off the top of my head. Could be totally wrong. Brian Lee Wolfhunt says, I mostly don't care if Shaggy is a vegetarian, but I would prefer that if he did become a vegetarian at some point, that they would either stick with it or give a reason that he isn't anymore. I totally agree. I think they should just stick with the idea that Shaggy is a vegetarian. The problem is, I don't know if they've ever explicitly stated that he is a vegetarian in the cartoons. I think it's mostly just inferred through the foods that he eats, when he's voiced by Casey Kasem, that is. So you can kind of tell, like, oh, that's interesting. He's not eating any meat, and he's also being voiced by Casey Kasem currently in this episode, so that's probably why. But when he's voiced by Matthew Lillard, here he is eating bacon, and I don't know. It's a minor inconvenience. It's a minor annoyance, I should say. I really wish they would stick with that. David Ramirez says, do you enjoy Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated? Do you think the ending plays a role in all the Scooby-Doo reboots? Okay, so confession time. I've only seen a little bit of the first season of Mystery Incorporated, but ever since I posted this video, a ton of people have been asking me about this, saying that it could be its own video, so I might have to go back and watch it. I didn't finish it just because I didn't really care for how Velma was portrayed on that show as like a super needy love interest to Shaggy, but I've been told that gets better, that they evolve character-wise, so I'll give it another shot. Carl George says, I would definitely like to hear more trivia about old school cartoons. That laugh track idea sounds great. Not to try to take this off the table for a future video, but I believe something that was interesting about that laugh track is that maybe it was only in the budget to get like a handful of different laughs, so you can just hear how they're all the same. You can just like pick out, they're like, all right, we have 2 specific belly laughs, we have 2 kind of lighter things, and it's just, I don't know. It's, I'll have to do more research into it, but it was really fun to read about. Perkman says, I believe that a food-loving character should eat all kinds of meals, vegetarian or not. That aside, I don't really care the diet of a character as long as they don't try and force it on the audience or other characters. Yeah, and I don't think that's ever been the case. I mean, Scooby has been shown eating meat right next to Shaggy, and that's his best friend, and he was never like, Scooby, why don't you... Well, hold on, let me go back to my amazing Shaggy impression. Like, Scoob. Yikes. I hate doing impressions. Like, Scoob, why don't you do... God, I hate this. No, I'm changing my mind. You get it. He never told Scooby to be a vegetarian. You get it. Because Scooby would probably die. We got another comment that says, I'm more concerned with how Shaggy has managed to remain so thin all of these years. What with the gorging and all. In my research, I did find, but I couldn't find any sources to back this up. I just found it in one area, so I didn't want to include it. But maybe it's worth just talking about as like, take it with a very large grain of salt. But I did find that part of the reason Kasem left the show was also the fact that Shaggy ate so much, and he really didn't like the idea of teaching kids about binge eating. But I don't believe that to be true, because even when he got back into the show, he was still eating a lot. It was just that he was eating a lot of vegetables, so maybe that's the difference. it's probably nothing. Forget I said anything. And I think that's going to do it for all of the comments. This was a very long video, I imagine. I've been recording for about an hour now, so I have no idea what the final video length is going to be, but I hope you guys enjoy these comment response videos. Let me know if you do by leaving a like down below. A good measure to help make sure that your comics get pulled up on these videos is to join the notification squad. Subscribe, hit that bell icon, be one of the first people to comment on new videos. I'm usually there in the comments during the first half hour or hour when a video goes live, responding to comments, talking to you guys directly, so it's always a great time. These are some wonderful nerds who support us over on Patreon. They help keep these shows going, and I just want to give a huge, sincere thank you to all of them. And if you want your name here and you want to just learn how to help out NerdSync, help us keep going here on YouTube, you can go to patreon.com/NerdSync. Link will be in the description down below. Along with all the videos that we talked about from Flash and Inhumans and Shaggy, all of that will be linked in the description down below. And also, hey, right here during the end card, go ahead and click on one of these videos if you want to watch them or rewatch them. Share them around. Make sure Matthew Lillard sees our video. You don't have to do that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Scott, reminding you to read between the panels and grow smarter through comics. See ya.